Well, good afternoon, good evening to some of you. Bienvenidos, one and all. You are here for Cultivating Voices live poetry. It's our second Sunday, which means it's our new book showcase. But not only is this just our new book showcase, it's never just our new book showcase, as you know, but this is the first of our fall season. I'm your host, Sandy Yannone. I am overjoyed, thrilled, elated, one might even say giddy, to be with you all today to host this constellation of poetry stars that we're going to hear from today. And when I use the word star, I don't mean like the movie star kind of star. I mean the illuminating kind of star, the ones that cast light so beautifully. And that is surely what we have today with our four readers. I'm Cathy Hailey, sharing the work of her daughter, Alexandra Delaine Hailey, Josephine Laurie, Cheng, and Grace Cavalieri. Well, before I introduce our first poet for today, I just want to share a little bit about Cultivating Voices live poetry with you. We began in March 2020, right at the beginning of the pandemic, and began an international, intersectional, intergenerational group of poets that is on the cusp of being 5,000 members. On our Facebook group, if you are also here, welcome those of you who are here live in our Zoom studio with us, and those of you who are watching live on Facebook and on YouTube. All poets and poetry lovers always welcome, and we're so glad that you are here with us today. As I mentioned, it's our new books showcase. Just a few bits of little housekeeping things too. A reminder that here in Zoom, the chat is live for all of you. So please do graciously and respectfully show your love and appreciation for today's poets. And of course, if you have the resources, please do feel free, very free, to buy 1, 2, 3, even 4 books or more. We will be posting all the poets today, their books in our live chat. And for those of you watching on Zoom and those of you watching on Facebook and or YouTube, those links will appear tomorrow. All of our technological wizardry and promotional efforts are thanks, of course, to Don Krieger and Kim Ports Parsons. Could never, ever do the program without them. Well, I want to now turn to the first of our poets for today. And before I share the formal bio, I want to share that I only knew Cathy Hailey tangentially through Kim. They live in the same region of the United States and had heard about her. And when I was invited to go to the launch of her daughter's chapbook, which was published posthumously, and Cathy will share with you whatever she cares to share around that narrative. Um, I was so incredibly moved by the experience of hearing Zan's poetry that I'm pretty sure that I texted Kim or chatted privately with Kim and said, I really want to bring Zan's poetry somehow. How can we do this? Do you think Cathy would come on the program? We're always seeking to have every new book showcase bring something in some ways that we haven't done before, a different poetry experience, a different way for us to access our humanity through poetry. And I feel like today's constellation of poets is doing just that. And particularly with Cathy sharing the work of her daughter. Yeah, so I'm so grateful that we're able to do this, and I'm so glad Cathy agreed to come onto the program. Well, Cathy Hailey, on behalf of her daughter Alexandra Zan Delaine Hailey, 1992 to 2018, Xandra was a writer, visual artist, dancer, and served as the inaugural poet laureate in Prince William County, Virginia, from 2014 to 2016. As you know, we are the fondest of fond of poet laureates here on Cultivating Voices Live Poetry. Hailey studied English and creative writing at Virginia Commonwealth University, where Gary Sang, Gregory Donovan, and David Wojan helped her hone her poetry. Cathy Hailey, as I mentioned, Alexandra's mom and high school creative writing teacher, teaches currently in the Johns Hopkins University online MA in Teaching Writing program, serves as the Northern Region Vice President of the Poetry Society of Virginia, and organizes in the Company of Laureates. Both Alexandra's and Cathy's chapbooks, Zan's Intrastate Lines and Cathy's I'd Rather Be a Hyacinth, were published by Finishing Line Press. Would you please welcome Cathy Hailey?
Thank you so much, Sandy. You asked about my telling about what happened with Alexandra. I can start with that, since I know everybody's always curious. But she was in a terrible car accident in Paducah, Kentucky, while she was working, at selling insurance. She had gone to the Appalachian part of Virginia and was very successful in talking to people in that area. So the next time they sent her to another, more rural area, it was Paducah, Kentucky. It was the day that she was supposed to finish her stint, Halloween of 2018. And she had just made her sales quota and was so excited to be coming home. And she ended up in a terrible rainstorm where the stop sign was covered with, tree branches and such. And by the time we heard, she hadn't made it. So it was a devastating experience. And all I can say is poetry and nature have helped me to get through that. And not immediately, but I sent both Alexandra's and my chapbook to several publishers, and Finishing Line accepted both of them. And Alexandra's was a chapbook a complete chapbook, ready to go. But we decided, since it was a small number of poems, to add some of her drawings, which were covering journal pages and sketchbooks. And we thought that the people, especially those who knew her, would appreciate seeing those, kind of bringing her to life in more than one way. Shall I go ahead and start reading from the book?
Yep, you just go right ahead. Yep.
All right. So these are originally this Intrastate Lines. The working title was Highway Poetry, and she was, even before those two trips I mentioned, spending some time driving, and would often, I guess, write in her head while she was going along, especially haiku or very short poems, and nature was an inspiration. You'll see a lot of different ways that she was inspired by these drives. And I'm going to start with, these are untitled, but they were numbered. The curious thing about the numbering is that they're numbered 1 through 20, but there is no number 18. It goes from 17. It goes from 17 to 19, and I had many versions of drafts of this chapbook, and I could not find any evidence of number 18 or even of a reason why it wasn't there. But I decided to honor it, that there was something about it that just had to be included in the book just the way it was. So I'll start with number 3. And then I'll just kind of read through unless you stop me, Sandy. And I'm not sure, exactly the timing, so you'll have to let me know. Number 3, it's another fuchsia sun day, but this time I only catch a glimpse as the setting sky disappears behind the sound barriers that line this Delmarva strip of I-95 between Baltimore and Silver Spring, like the summer canopy behind fog, driving me west in the golden rush hour, before disappearing as the motorway forks toward the Cardinal State, relaying a simple July formula for hypothetical dreamers that fish from the moon without bait for the stars. And I won't show you all the drawings, but this is the sun and the moon, and another image on the other page to go with a poem with the first line, Mud. But I'll go on to number 4. I am from the back roads, between here, there, and everywhere, because the Beatles will forever hold number 1. Even 12th Planet notes A Day in the Life as the greatest song. And just an aside there, Here, There, and Everywhere was the song that my husband and I danced to at our wedding. And Alexandra wrote a memoir titled A Day in the Life, or Days in the Life, I think. Number 5, I scale the stars with smoke clouds, my feet slipping into the toes of my shoes, each toe bending more and more at the knuckle. As they meet the interior, heat squeezes my brain waves, sending the thermal shocks through my psyche. 6, the bumblebee is such a brute for a nectar lover. Unlike butterflies, who ride nectar pallets like West Coast waves, drawing nectar in the breeze. She has 2 that are inspired by Van Gogh, and she used to do a workshop for her Poet Laureate project and also for a psychology professor at VCU, where she would borrow lines from Vincent van Gogh's letters to his brother Theo, and have students in a class jot down words and phrases from a letter, and then also create a painting using words from the letter, or sometimes it was a sculpture using Play-Doh, or whatever she decided to use as the medium for the workshop. And so she would do an ekphrastic project, but sometimes she'd do it with multiple stages so that it might go from poetry to painting, back to poetry again, or some students might choose to write nonfiction or fiction along with the prompts. So this one is called, well, this one is number 7, but it's also after Iris's Saint Remy, May 1890. And a few of the words are from the letters. Prussian blue petals wave and reach, ranging in hues to pure carmine, whose verdant stacks disappear like a thunderstorm into the wet depths of golden vases that stand against a gleaming room walled in striking lemon yellow. And I'll skip to number 9, also a Vincent van Gogh inspired poem. Vincent van Gogh to Theo, Arles, 1888. Bear in mind, no mortal poisonous zinc white without mercy to paint them, a garden of olives red earth, crimson trunks, sky, lemon yellow, faces the blade, orchards again. The poem in between these two is just 2 lines. Number 8, dream against starstruck currents. The moon awaits your embrace. And I'll show you the image for that one. Is that visible to you? Good. And then a lot of people have picked out this pileated woodpecker. They like that one. So I'll read that, number 11. At West Shore and Beechwood, not a single beech tree fertilizes flourishing branches of dainty nuts. But the pileated woodpecker laughs in hysterics from the tipped top of the crabapple tree as lily pads tread by the shore of its shadow. And I smile, thinking, this will be the day. Big orange ball sinking in the water, sweet breeze kissing my bare feet. And big orange ball sinking in the water is from a country music song. Number 16, which is also published in this Circling with the Poets Laureate book from the last In the Company of Laureates event. I hope you see the sun rise, and I hope you look right into its climbing fire, because there's a chunk of morning when that's more than okay. I hope you take advantage of the moment. Stop to sit on the fence and watch houses paint watercolor portraits across the pond's surface. And I hope you always catch a glimpse of the cattails blooming like white linen in autumn when the moment presents itself. And 17, desolate parks, line 206 from base to the ocean, periodically spaced out between seemingly endless rows of holly red and burnt sienna bushes, driving warm hues at the wintering feet of slightly cyaned gray, sky with curls that roll horizontal, like the forefathers once wigged, behind a mighty pen, a John Hancock, and an incandescent blueprint. '19, forever on ice, sinking figure eights into frozen satin, grading flakes in a beveling trail. How are we doing for time there? Is that good? Thank you so much.
You could go to 20. You're good. You're
Okay,
good.
okay, I'll do
Yeah,
20.
go to do 20.
Okay.
You're fine with
All right.
time.
And this is the final poem, 20. Then there's this point when the face of a stranger is all too familiar, and even though the cities change, the faces seem to stay the same. Darling, follow me into the next dimension where the face I recognize is the only one I know, from skin to bone and back out the skull. While sitting at another false marble bar in another hotel lounge, past the revolving door and well-lit champagne lobby, where cigarette smoke rarely drifts past the first fanned notch. Although each moment is sonified by an unforgettable laugh, the resonance simply slips into words served with tomorrow's corrective breakfast.
Mm.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Cathy. That's Cathy Hailey, everyone. Reading the poems of daughter Alexandra Delaine Hailey.
And she was 6, just so
she was 26 years old. Folks, when I had the opportunity, the privilege, the honor, the poignant joy, I will put those two words together, the poignant joy that was in the room when you launched the chapbook. I was so incredibly struck by here is a young woman, here is an artist. There's really no artist, teacher, I mean, painter. She worked in so many mediums and was so beloved from so many different, all those venues, all the people from all those different venues, from family, friends, students, teachers, admirers of her work. I mean, it was extraordinary who was in that room on that evening. And I thought to myself, this woman in 26 years has done more with her life than I've done in my close to 60 years. I was just absolutely, absolutely astounded. And I'm I'm just so struck by how your family has been able to move through and with your grief to be able to extend her artistry forward, just keep it going forward. And I'm sure there's a lot of private moments that aren't like this one where it's a different story and it's difficult. Um, but I'm so grateful to see an example of this. I mean, here's an inaugural poet laureate of a county that was so beloved, and to be able to, as I said, continue to bring her work forward. I'll just quote a poem from poem number 17, or just 16, that has always stayed with me. I hope you take advantage of the moment. I feel like um that is such a critical lesson for each and every one of us in the poetry of Alexandra, uh, was
Thank
Alexandra Hailey. Yeah, thank you. And
And
I
that's
just,
really her. That was that she really believed that and she took it to heart and lived her life that way.
I included her chapbook in my Sealy challenge this August, was one of the books I read. And I love that I can see the artist's eye at work in her poems. And it's also just so poignant that here she had this highway project, all of the way that it all the way that it all moves together, and moves. And folks, I just want to, as I mentioned, if you have the resources today, this chapbook from Finishing Line Press it's really stunning in seeing the process and the artistry of a poet at work. So thank you, Cathy. And I look forward to next time when we'll get to hear some of your poems as well. So
Thank you so
thank
much,
you.
Sandy. The opportunity was wonderful.
Thank you. Well, folks, as I mentioned today, for so many reasons, there's so many reasons today is such just an incredible, moving galaxy of poetry. And I'm incredibly happy to be introducing Josephine Laurie, whom, of course, many of you in the room, you've heard her read here on Cultivating Voices from the very earliest weeks of Cultivating Voices. Anytime she's on, I always do mention, the first time she was she was literally upside down. Like, we were going live from Facebook. We weren't using Zoom yet, and we didn't all know how to use Facebook. And this is from the earliest days. I'm so grateful to just have been able to develop a friendship and relationship through poetry with you over time. And today, what I'm so grateful for, how fun is this? Um, Joe is in Albuquerque, another of like our hubs of poetry. We have so many members from Albuquerque, and she's in Albuquerque where she's been sharing poetry from, from her new collection that we're going to hear from. Um, she read with an orchestra earlier today, if I'm not mistaken. And I know I was treated firsthand to the unbelievable poetry treatment that Albuquerque provides for its poets when I was down there in June. So it's really fun to be able to share this experience of you experiencing Albuquerque and having you on the program today, Joe. I just want to just let everybody know that. Well, Josephine Laurie, I also always love the opening to her bio, and I've always loved this. A pearl in this diamond world. Josephine Laurie has shared her poetry live on stage and in global Zoom rooms. Her words have been put to music, danced, interpreted in ASL, which is American Sign Language, and integrated into visual art. She has 3 collections, Unity, the Cowichan series, and her newest is In My Father's House. Her poems appear in literary magazines and anthologies in 15 countries and 5 languages. Josephine has taught writing workshops, served as an editor, a contest judge, and is active in Canadian, American, and international poetry societies. And in 2023, her poem, Enough, was selected for an award-winning Feed the Children video PSA. Would you all welcome our dear friend, Josephine Laurie?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Excellent.
you sound
Thank
beautiful.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here in the American Southwest. I drove south from Calgary through Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, and now I'm here. And I did actually read to live music that was in Denver with Seth Harris. I read in Silver City as well with Pamela Williams and a group at Zocalo. And I read this morning with Billy Brown's Chatter, Sunday Chatter. And there's a few other engagements coming up, not least of which is next weekend's New Mexico Poetry Summit. So I'm so grateful to all the folks that organized that and invited me, namely Marissa Prada and Stacey Dyson, who started up Tesoro. I would like to read from In My Father's House. But before I do, I would like to acknowledge that where I live is the ancestral traditional lands that were inhabited and traversed by millennia by a number of different indigenous groups, including but not limited to the Kani, the Kainai, Lakota, Siksika, and Tsutsina. And while I've been in the American Southwest, I just looked quickly, and there's 23 different peoples recognized within the state of New Mexico, including the Pueblo people, the Apache, and the Navajo, who I believe call themselves the Dene. And as a point of interest, the Dene also live in what is now Canada. So In My Father's House is quite a journey. Actually, I wanted to backtrack a little bit. My apologies to the other readers. Because I'm on my phone, I don't have the chance to comment on your readings. But Cathy, I was very moved. My condolences as well for the loss of your daughter. Thank you for sharing her work posthumously. And the one line that sticks with me is, the resonance slips into words. So thank you for sharing that. So my collection is poems about how who I am is formed by place and time. So my parents' country and place of origin and family stories. Some of the Cultivating Voices family may have already heard these, but this gave me a chance to bring it all together. No one in my family has died a simple death. My father's grandfather was a wick, the oil in his headlamp igniting when a vein opened in the sulfur mine. 4 men carried his char home to die. My mother's mother was the breath after blowing out a candle. Thick black hair in a high bun, but weak of lungs, no medicine to cure her. My mother's father was a mystery. Is there a gravesite, a church record, his name on a ship's manifest? freckles, eyes of blue or green, like the sea. Those are the greats and the grands I never knew. My father's father was a glass of water crashing to the floor. He died once, but was buried twice, once in the ground at Mount Pleasant and later in a drawer in a concrete wall in the old Sicilian style. My father's mother was a plume of smoke. She faded in stages, stroke taking away her ability to walk, to eat, to recognize. By the time her heart stopped, I had grieved her in 100 ways. My father is a cat on life 6 or 7. Heart attack, prostate cancer, testicular cancer, coal mine lungs, airport collapse. They science fictioned him, cauterizing tissue around his heart. Scar no longer conveying the impulse to live. Now ischemia constricts vessels in his brain. How are you, he asks when I call. And the kids? And the weather? And the kids? My mother is a wristwatch with broken hands. She tricks death by believing herself invincible, tosses an enchantment of salt onto black ice. We watch her decline, gears and springs seized and stuck, losing her piece by piece. They say you died twice. According to Bansky, once when you stop breathing. The second, the last time someone says your name. Myself, Josephine, Leah, Lorre. How will I go? Will I fight death, or will I walk headlong into that slow-moving river, willow branch above me, swaying in the wind? The next poem is called Trinakria, which is the ancient Greek name for the island of Sicily. So before Sicily became an official part of the country that is now Italy in the 1860s, which is 5 or 6 years before Canada became a country, the island of Sicily was colonized by different peoples. The Siculi, I think, were the original inhabitants, but the Phoenicians came, the Carthaginians, the Greeks, Romans, the Spanish, the French, Arabs, Jews, the Germans. So there's a little bit of a mix of everything. Trinakria. This island runs like magma through my veins. Waters blue, transluce, lapped 3 separate shores. Mar Terrenio, Mar Ionio, Mediterraneo, the sea in the middle of the land. Sicily is Medusa's head, 3 legs bent at the knee, sheaths of golden wheat. Scirocco blows red Saharan sand across hilly scapes. Dancing la manzurka, la tarantella, under la luna, la ninna nanna. Lo sole, the sun rising onto blood orange Sicilian skies. And typically I preface this poem, many places have a patron saint, and Sicily's patron saint is Santa Rosalia, who has the same name as my mother, Rosalie. Sicily also has a patron goddess, which I think is really cool. And I think it's super cool that it's not male deities, it's female in both cases, La Sicilia. The next poem is a gentle pull, and as you can see, it goes back and forth across the page, and in some instances, it's joined in the center. Sicilia smiles back at me in black and white. My mother freshly engaged, flanked by my father's sisters, skirts flounced high. The smell of earth baking at 43 degrees, colossal shadows cast at the Temple of Concordia. Agrigento, founded 600 years before Christ by sailors from Rhodes and Crete, Daedalus and his son Icarus. This timeless intertwine of history and myth into mystery. Echoes, old names, Girgenti, Agrigentum, Acracas. We sat in gray-green shade, my sister and me flanked by our children under l'oliva, the olive gnarled by the slow blink of 2,000 years. Mediterraneo, sea in the middle of the land. When you walk out of Lomare, the sun dries sea onto skin so that in each kiss, you can taste our salt-sweet origin. That evening in Campagna, 10 minutes from town, Makushina asked if I would go with her to get no limone, a lemon. I said, si, expecting a car ride. Instead, she led me into the darkening grove. hanging over us like lanterns, firm ripeness of fruits, la Sicilia, a twist and a gentle pull. Lo vento, the wind. At the edge of this prairie, hills snuggle rocky peaks. Chinook, snow eater, say the Salish, winter's reprieve. Winds blow east, driving mercury from 20 below to 13 above in a single day. Our city duvet, bright sky blue under silver arc cloud, while there, Scirocco magnifies summer heat. Winds blow north across the Saharan immensity. A sheet of red sand gathers over the Mediterranean, falling like blood onto this timeless land. The smell of sawdust. This was originally published in 2004. The smell of sawdust on his clothes and in his hair and in his pores. The roughness of his hands and the breadth of his suntanned back. The darkness of his eyes under lashes thick. She, pale and fair, hazel eyes, auburn hair. He, profound. His proclamations meant to be absolute. She, shrill and reigning over us nonetheless. The bathroom he built in the basement of our 3-story house, where so many rooms were just for company, just for show. He, my father, a deep pool. She, a rushing torrent, a thunderstorm, and she would hurl words that hurt the air around our ears. So many things unsaid. Stories we never learned until we were grown. Her mother dying young, leaving 5 children behind. Her father dead or gone, rumors hushed. Her brother taking her in to work in his house. Boiling water carried in from village fountain to wash the diapers of his infant child. The letters that my father sent, taken away, hidden by her brother's wife, behind the mirror of the dresser. How she became betrothed to another, believing my father had forsaken her. How my father's father and my father's brother went to the house to ask why she wasn't writing back. Those were different times. When I asked why their love was not officially declared before my father left to mine the coal heart of Belgium, I was told they were too young. He had no diamond for her finger, no gold, and their promise was to keep them until he could claim her as his bride. All of this I never knew, for I was but a child, but some evenings he would sit upon a backless stool in the basement of our house, smelling of plain pine, hands rough with work, fatigue heavy on his shoulders, and she would kneel before him, lift his feet one by one from the basin in which they soaked, wash them and towel them dry, and he would look upon her softly, and I could feel, but still not comprehend, the ties that went beyond their words. The next poem is called A Braccetto, which means arm in arm, walking arm in arm, and it's based on a photograph of my parents as a newlywed couple in Belgium. The roughness of gabardine and houndstooth, the smooth of stocking silk. After the war, you stride arm in arm down an unnamed street in Mons, or is it Charleroi? None of the coal shows in the seams of my father's skin or in the bubbles of his lungs, and although the photograph is black and white, I can see glints of sun in my mother's auburn hair. How the wind lifts heavy curl, drifting scent towards my father. That confidence of newlywed on cosmopolitan cobblestone. Her 2-piece suit, jacket and skirt, a smart black handbag, peekaboo toes, and my father, hand in pant pocket, thin striped tie, the jaunt, both with one foot in the air. I'm going to skip ahead. 2 years ago was a hard time for me. I had just retired. My son was married. I went to visit my parents in Toronto and realized how far my father had declined physically and how far my mother had declined cognitively. And I left Toronto thinking that I might not see my father alive again. So I would like to read Dreams. Sorry. What is it? Just a moment. To sit quietly. And it's based on a a verse from Robert Frost's poem Reluctance, which was the prompt. When to the heart of man was it ever less than treason to go with the drift of things, to yield with a grace to reason and bow and accept the end of a love or a season. So this is the last poem I wrote when my father was still alive. Such treason to sit quietly with death and not shake his cold grip from my arm, to know he waits expectant in the hall, my father's ragged exhalation tainted by his breath, my father's face grown gaunt, teeth missing from his skull, fingers spectral, and sometimes his gaze dimmed, as if he sees us only from afar, a figment of himself, wavering between this realm and next, like bedsheets flapping in the breeze. Photographs bring heaves and tears as he recalls the young man he once was. He moans in his sleep and he talks in his dreams. Emaciated legs no longer hold his withered frame. He winces when I tend his wounds, but brightens when he says my name. And I think death must mean no great harm, for 90 is a long time on this earth. And so I no longer resent the tender touch of that which I no longer dread. But oh, what anguish to sit quietly with death and not shake his cold grip from my arm. I'd also like to share the second last piece from this collection that's called 9:30. And I make reference to this cover book. It is 9:30. My body says sleep. My mind says rest. My heart steps out into the night, leaving the door wide open in search of the call of coyotes. If I had a slingshot and 7 smooth stones, 5 smooth stones, even 3, I would pluck the streetlights from the sky one by one, so that all that would be left would be the cold moon and me. I no longer care about the stars. Their stories no longer matter, the chatter of man, the warmth of fire and field, none of it. There is a place in my father's garden, a bower of fig, and when I stood in it, sunlight filtered through various spots as if our sky held multiple sounds. That was the day after my father died. It is 9:34. I looked at the clock and noticed when 24 hours had slipped by after his death. He passed at 00:18. Time has become an accordion with only sad strains stretching out and tumbling past. It has been 6 days since he passed, 30 hours since his cold body was jacklifted into a maw, sealed with putty and trowel and drill. My father had a trowel just like that. He too used tools. I had gone down to the garage into one of those balsa wood baskets that once held summer tomatoes, tucked one of my father's tools into my tote for the funeral home in case I needed to feel him, a wrench. And I tucked a few nails into the pocket of his best suit, some loose change, for he always had nails in his pocket when he worked carpenter like the Father of Christ. Nails and coins sometimes fell out of his pockets when he lay down to nap. And when I was tasked with vacuuming the couch cushions on Saturday mornings, I would find them, pennies and quarters and nickels and dimes, and always a pencil behind his ear, a smile on his face as broad and as brilliant as the Sicilian sky. It is now 9:38. I felt his spirit surround me while his lungs still expanded and emptied and his pacemakered heart still beat, his hands still warm. That was before his forehead felt like he had just been taken from deep freeze. When I brought my lips to his brow in the casket, I cupped his head with both hands. He didn't like to be cold. Commóllame, he would implore. Cover me, please. He asked so little of me at the end. His spirit around me just past 4 that afternoon, my kids coming in from day-long travel, me at the entrance of the hospital breathing real air for the first time in days. I felt him and I felt his peace. And if I sit quiet for a moment, I can still feel it, but will it fade? Like the taste of salt in the sea, the aroma of coffee, a hug that feels like it could go on forever, if only we could stand still enough. I do not know. It is 9:42. And if I may, I'd like to share a poem that didn't make it to the collection because it wasn't written until a few weeks ago. My mom came out to live with me in her dementia, and I took care of her. She's living in Toronto now in a seniors facility. And while she was living with me, I was sleeping very lightly, so I could listen for her going to the bathroom at night. And I realized that she speaks in her sleep. So this is a true story. I mean, they're all true stories, but this is the recent true story. My mother speaking to my father. She speaks to him in her sleep, a little love-drugged voice that has retracted its barbs, its stabs. She no longer the queen of her destiny. Time has faded away all their petty arguments, the clawed words that hurt me more maybe than they hurt him, for he loved her despite his words ringing in my head. Where's your mother? Take good care of your mother. Just last week when I called was the first time that she has forgotten that he is dead. She told me she is preparing to go home, that she is waiting for him, that he promised it wouldn't be long, that he would help her. I know it is true. Thank you everyone for listening.
Oh, that is Josephine Loray, everyone. And you know, if there is ever any doubt how the specificity of one person's poems can bring us to the universality of our own lives, those poems, they just strike those chords just so poignantly. I mean, as you know, you and I, we've been on parallel tracks, and I lost my dad. And again, listening to your poem, I'm brought back to the hardest and the most transcendent moments of that experience in your poems. And I'm sure the same is for others in this room. The collection is in my father's house, and it also was a collection that I read in my Seeley challenge. It just so happens today that everyone except Grace, no offense, Grace, was in my Seeley challenge this time around. So it was amazing to spend time with your collection, and also now to hear them again as a collection, as we've been hearing them, as you've been writing them. But it was really amazing. I wish you all the best, safe travels, and please give everyone that you meet in Albuquerque a hug from me.
Thank you. I gave Billy your hug this morning, and I hope you gave mine to your mom.
I was
Okay.
everyone, that's Josephine Loray. Oh my gosh, beautiful. All right, folks, I am thrilled to introduce Jen Cheng to all of you. Here's the story. As most of you know, I've been running around like the person I am, just running around the country. And I happen to be this particular day at the New York City Book Festival, Poetry Festival, actually, on Governor's Island in New York City. And I was in it was the VIP tent, but Jen, it wasn't very VIP-ish, was it? Oh my gosh, it was horrible. No,
it was where the beverages were.
yeah, the beverages. There were supposed to be snacks, but there were no snacks. And my friend was a little more upset about that than I was, but that's okay. It's all good. And by friend, I'm not talking about Jen. I'm talking about the person I was traveling with that day. So I'm standing there waiting for a beverage. And I feel like the energy of a person standing next to me. And it's Jen, whom I've never met. And I'm like, I feel like I know you. You're a poet laureate, aren't you? Or something like this. And you're like, yeah, I feel like I know you. Well, and it turned out like I was trying to figure out how I knew Jen. And I was like, you're a poet laureate, maybe. Like it turns out she is. She's a poet laureate of West Hollywood. But we kind of never really got to the bottom of like what it was that like compelled us to really feel like that we had known each other, that we knew each other. So I'm gonna today publicly, I'm just gonna chalk it up to a past life experience. I'm just gonna maybe you've got it. You've got it. Okay, go ahead.
Were you at Kansas City for the AWP?
Oh, I was.
So I did visit Kai Kogan's
That's
talk
it.
at the end, but I don't think we actually met.
Oh,
But
maybe not.
we
Okay.
were in the same theater space.
Okay. All right. Okay. So yeah, so the the electrons, the ions, they did their magic there, like fairy dust to set up that moment in New York City. Yeah, beautiful. Okay. All right. Well, now that mystery is solved. It's always good when you can solve a mystery, particularly publicly. Well, also, I was so struck. As y'all know, I have a penchant. I love I love poets laureate. I love them because they are immaculate, dedicated poetry citizens. Um, I feel I'm not a poet laureate. I feel an instant kinship though because of that poetry citizenship. And we just kept intersecting all throughout the rest of the festival that Saturday. And Jen was really helpful in getting us where we needed to go at the end of the festival. It was just kind of this magical day of meeting you. And then I was able to meet Jen through their poetry, which, because of the Seeley Challenge, a whole nother like magical, beautiful experience. So this is not only your new book showcase debut, it's your Cultivating Voices debut today. And I'm so, so glad we were able to do this with Jen Cheng's collection, Braided Spaces. Oh my God, the cover is just spellbinding. And what's inside is spellbinding. So a little bit more from the formal biography. Jen Cheng is the current poet laureate of West Hollywood, author of the poetry collection Braided Spaces, and a 2023 California Arts Council Fellow. She's a multidisciplinary artist who blends East-West cultural influences of Feng Shui poetry. She teaches workshops on this. And she is definitely, absolutely 1000% a cross-pollinator and community curator. Welcome, Jen Cheng.
Thank you, Sandy and Cultivating Voices. I'm so excited to be part of this community. I'm so happy we met by chance, being thirsty and hot in that drink tent, so that we could bond more, trade poetry, and get to know each other. And thank you for including me in your Seeley Challenge. I am calling in from a creative capital known as West Hollywood, and we are on the ancestral and unceded homelands of the Gabrieleño, Tongva, and Gabrieleño Quiche peoples. West Hollywood is a small city surrounded completely by Los Angeles, for those of you who don't know California, and we are the home of lots of creative people in your literary past in any of our school books. So just to celebrate the city, I wrote this for April National Poetry Month as an ode to the city, for those of you calling in from nationally. And you're like, what is this tiny place called West Hollywood? We are completely surrounded by studios and art museums and a lot of great history. So this is called Recipe for Creativity, Blessed by the Ghosts of the Greats. It's not in my book. It was something I wrote just recently in April. My book came out in October of last year, and I'm so thankful that Sandy is showcasing my new book before my 1-year anniversary. So thank you, thank you. All right, Recipe for Creativity, Blessed by Ghosts of the Greats. Crack open songs of paved paradise on sunset. Whisk in the air of Grammy-winning music from the troubadour. Cut a sprig of rosemary, smelling history on Harper Avenue. Rub in soil from gardens of Art Deco apartments. Soak in sun from the gates of Morrison's historic home. Sprout new seeds from a neighbor's plant poolside. Sauce up corn dogs from the haunted sound studio next to Shake Shack. Chop up drafts and let the brilliant bits simmer. Flip to the acknowledgements of bestsellers at Book Soup. Build layers of a team like they did to boost you. Roll with friends you meet at library workshops. Wrap yourself with robes and light candles. Chant under full moons to call upon the ghosts of the greats who wrote books, films, and songs to sprinkle glitter and persistence to never let go of dreams. So that poem's on my Substack, and I have links to the history of where these landmarks are in West Hollywood that F. Scott Fitzgerald and Joni Mitchell and all these greats wrote about our neighborhood and formed this energy that I'm so lucky to call my home. I'm honored and so appreciative to have this 3-year term as the current poet laureate of West Hollywood. And because of that energy, I put together this poetry chapbook. And I want to acknowledge this gorgeous art is actually from a mural by internationally famous Lauren Y.S., who is also from the Chinese American diaspora. It's at the Asian American Students Building at Yale. So those of you who are near Yale, go visit. This is just a tiny piece of that gorgeous mural. And I'm not going to give a workshop on feng shui poetry, but I've spent decades studying spirituality, mind, body, wellness, and negotiating what it means to be Chinese American. I am American born Chinese, and my parents are from Hong Kong, a British colony. So they've always had some blend of East-West cultural upbringing. And I divide my book into 5 parts, and you can go to the appendix to learn more of an introduction on feng shui poetry. Just you're not going to get a PhD in feng shui. It's just using the elements as a launch pad, as a what I call sunglasses, as a lens to kind of look at your life or what you want to talk about, and then it helps drive my poems so that you're never stuck with writer's block. If you have a lens to look at or have a prompt, that kind of pushes you to get out of your head and trust what you're writing. So I include the Chinese characters, which are like Egyptian hieroglyphics. The visual, it's like fire has that, buzzy energy. So the first one I'm going to read for you is Chow Mein in Chiapas. A little bit about me is that I'm very, very multicultural. I grew up in Oakland, Berkeley, and San Francisco, so I'm definitely a hippie and multilingual and all of that. So here's you go. Chow Mein in Chiapas. My genetics didn't give me good rhythm, so I learned it from my Afro-Panamanian dance teacher. She'd encourage passionately, eso, pa, 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 pa. As I listened to the Cuban beats, I fell in love with Spanish. So I flew to Chiapas to study like a good hippie. My community college Spanish gave me good practice on how to order un café, but my Chinese cooking skills earned me my host family's affection. They asked, please cook us authentic chow mein. So I went all over town to find ingredients and learned words not in the textbook, like jengibre. So I served them with chow mein, and they politely ate with confusion and finally asked, ¿Por qué no cocinas con nopales? Their local Mexican chow mein came with cactus. So with my elementary Spanish, I said politely, ¿No piensas que hay nopales en China? And we all had a good laugh. Dance and chow mein are my passports to bond beyond language. Yet, fama, bailamos! The next section is earth. And one thing about the 5 elements is I feel like it's universal in pagan cultures and Ayurvedic medicine and any kind of culture. I feel like we all understand fire energy. If you're an Aries or Leo in astrology, you really understand fire. And I'm a Taurus and very earthy. So earth energy is very stable, as you could see the graphic, the character. It's sturdy, very square. So I'll read one called Postmodern Sapphos. I am a Sapphic poet and wanted to harken back to our ancestral roots of the original lesbian poet Sappho. So it's a certain rhythm, and I had to walk around in the rhythm to try to feel the rhythm in my body. And I really like teaching people to be in their body when they're writing poetry. Postmodern Sapphos. Eager lush magnolia flowers blossom. Seek admirers loving the lazy Sunday. Ready bagels, cream cheese, and mango lassi. Newspapers open. Hear the cozy morning doves coo and flutter. Open windows joining the neighbor's passion. Bring on lilts and harmonies, sing with pride for memories later. Fluid inspiration that slides from side to side, unfettered gender-free roles that further child's play with privileged toys to harness liberty's pleasure. The next section is metal. I think it reminds me of the tin roofs that, some of our old original houses might have been built up. So how many of you are foodies? Yeah, well, we'll go on more about food because I joke that, if you don't love food, something's wrong with you. I think it's part of being human that we can bond over food. So I call this Chinese food as a political act. Did you know Chinese food is more American than apple pie? That more people eat rice than McDonald's French fries? On a better day, my ability to cook Chinese food gives me a passport to privilege. Privilege to cook organic and free-range Chinese food for a Bel Air party for money that pays for rent. Because you can't get organic Chinese food. Because Americans decided it's supposed to be cheap fast food, a decision given the racist history of immigration policy and importing railroad workers. On a bad day, I'm told someone doesn't like Chinese food because it's greasy. And greasy feels like not just an insult, but another hate word. Has greasy ever been a compliment? I defend my culture with politeness while seething inside, patient with cultural ignorance yet again, a reminder that not everyone bothers to learn about other cultures and step outside our history of racism and oppression. So this nice Chinese girl society expects me to be asked, what have you tried? And usually they say Panda Express. That's fast food, right? So I make homemade fried rice or chow mein for them to try. And they realize that Chinese food isn't just cheap and greasy, that my culture is something more than egg rolls. I am expected to take the high road and not be furious every time I experience yet another paper cut of ignorance or racism. Chinese food, my cultural diplomacy to get people to be curious and bridge intercultural relations. It is not enough to live side by side when we are treated like trash and targets of violence and theft. I cannot watch one more video of another Asian being beaten or killed. This mob mentality of taking or trashing, we are not cheap and not greasy. Hey neighbor, can we just feed everyone some Chinese food and have them listen to some anti-racist cultural re-education? Feed everyone with love so we can stop this nightmare. Feed them Chinese food as a political act. Thank you for listening to that, because that was my response to all that anti-Asian violence that really surged during COVID and Trump propaganda. So I truly thank you all for being here today to listen to all our different cultures and our different stories. And that act of witnessing is really why I'm a poet, that we're here to share stories and bond and connect with each other. This one is from my water section. Water represents migration and a number of other things, and perhaps transforming sadness into something more, I don't know, poetic. So I'm going to share a little bit of music to represent that migration of stories internationally, that the earth is mostly made of water. And here we go. Let me do my, oops. Let me go do my tech thing here, sharing sound. And I give credit to the musician John Zhang, who is a San Francisco jazz pianist, taking this traditional Chinese song and making it jazzy. Let's hear it. And it's just a little bit of musical introduction, so you get that blend of Asian Americanness. 10,000 butterflies. How many butterflies had to flutter to change the weather patterns? Enough for my ancestors to survive, to escape the cultural cleansing that was meant to erase those who were different. Popo said, many did not make it, especially on your father's side, tailors, those who had skills too smart. Some drowned. They had to swim across the waters of the British colony Hong Kong, where they made a new life. But why, I asked. 點解啊? 點解? To survive, to escape the bad guys. Grandma tried to explain to me when I was only 5. When I was a teen, the Japanese soldiers could have taken me. I had to take the burnt bottom black bits of the walk and put it on my face to make me ugly, and claimed my older brother as my husband because the soldiers were likely to take away the single young pretty girls. Young pretty girls were taken during the war, so she had to pretend it was safer to be ugly. What if Grandma Popo had been taken away? I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be here today if Mom didn't marry Dad, because Dad promised Ma on her deathbed that he would return to find a bride back in Hong Kong. Back in Hong Kong in 1996, I traveled as a college student before the turnover to China to find my roots. So much missing history. But my relatives said I had to promise, never go to China alone. Never go to China alone without a tour group to protect you because you don't speak Mandarin and you stand like an American. Anything you say or not say will make you a rebel, and for no reason a lowly policeman can throw you in jail and you will be disappeared. Disappeared? Like the desaparecidos of the protest songs of Latin America I sang with my college choir? Whew. The power of bold gay men in the streets of Buenos Aires reclaiming the slang mariposa. Cambia, todo cambia. Cambia, todo cambia. I found the underground lesbian club in Buenos Aires, down an empty street, down a stairwell to a basement of an arcade, where I asked a girl to dance with me. Dance with me? She and her friends laughed at this loca, this crazy chinita, crazy chinita, tourist traveling alone, wandering into a club lesbiana, where the police still raided gay clubs. And I could be disappeared. So they drove me home. They drove me home to Palermo, where I was staying with the gay boys who weren't allowed at the lesbian clubs, but were friends with the proudly out local mariposas who worked at planetout.com. Planetout.com, one of the 1990s gay websites where we hungrily scoured for travel information to find the fun and find where we thought we could safely travel. But what about the places that were not safe? Not safe to be pretty boys or butch girls. I passed as a femme and could claim one of the boys as my husband for different reasons than grandma. It's a different kind of war to survive the political winds that sometimes swing violent. I now choose to live in a proud gay little haven where I imagine I walk without the threat of being disappeared as I count the miracles of butterflies. That little haven is West Hollywood, where I've been a resident for umpteen years. The last section of my book is wood. And wood represents family, and it doesn't have to be literal wood. It could be like ecosystems, it could be farmland. It's just growth, the upward growth. And since my grandma, I didn't expect her to be such a prominent part of my book. She makes another appearance here. How many of you are Bridgerton fans? Shonda Rhimes, it's some soapy Jane Austen Regency vibes. So I like to write from a narrator's point of view that's not my own. And so pardon my bad British accent, but I think it's a little bit fun to read from a different narrator's point of view. This is where poetry comes alive when it's read out loud. And you can find other readings on my website at gencvoice.com. I try to post them on my social media or on YouTube. So this poem is called Bridgerton's Narrator Spills the Tea About My Grandma. And it's an abecedarian, so I'm very proud of the word I found for X. You can listen for that. Bridgerton's narrator spills the tea about my grandma. Grandma dearly departed with a grand hurrah, hailing respect instead of grief. In turn, her memorial party was her dream birthday celebration as she just died gracefully of heart failure in her sleep. Kind of a quiet exit, but so obvious as her last symphony. Manipulation was her modus operandi, so none of her surviving 7 children could say no to showing up. Over all the years of plots she orchestrated to stoke personality struggles with believable lies as drama queen and mother mastermind of recurring rivalries between siblings. You needed the latest headlines to know who was mad at whom at this telenovela that could outdrink other families under the table. Air violins would play to whine about one sister's injustice or how xenophobia ruined a brother's attempt at a white-collar career. Yarn schemes were what she left behind with a sorted puzzle of where she might have hidden her jewelry. So accumulated hiding places were ways to anchor her bravery through war, occupation, and poverty as she silently sang her survival song, conducting her power even from beyond her ears, cleaned up her home, dug through every jacket looking for secret pockets, ever reminded how this frail elder knew how to perform her finale. So a drama queen in one's family causes quite a bit of, I don't know, toxic behavior you bring to the therapist. But if you write it through the Bridgerton's narrator, it's fantastic gossip. So do I have time for one more, Sandy?
Oh, I hate to say it, but Grace is on a time frame.
Okay,
So,
I'll
yeah,
leave you with that.
with the finale.
Yes!
With the finale. Oh my gosh. Everyone, that is Jen Cheng with a performance that will be remembered in perpetuity. I'll say these two things. I love it when poets create poetry experiences, and you created a poetry experience today. Wow. The other thing that I'll also say is your first poem, your new poem, Recipe for Creativity. I know I'm not getting the whole title of the new poem. What an amazing prompt that every single person could do. It's so in some ways so much more lively than the prompt that I always hear people do about, like, where am I from? You know, that litany of where I am from. I love the idea of the recipe as a way to bring the ingredients in. Genius, just fabulous. The book is Braided Spaces. I'm going to go to New Haven and see the mural. I can't wait. I'm so excited. Thank you so much, Jen.
Thank you, Sandy.
You're very welcome. Well, folks, I'm going to be very brief with my introduction because Grace Cavalieri, frankly, needs no introduction. I will just say this. I plan to say a little more, but when I grow up, I want to be Grace Cavalieri. If I could even come a fraction close, I'd be happy. Period. Folks, the formal bio needs no bio, but Grace Cavalieri, Poet Laureate Emerita of Maryland, is the author of more than a score of books and chapbooks of poetry, including What the Psychic Said from Goss Publishing 2020, Other Voices, Other Lives from 2017, and most recently, The Long Game from WordWorks Books 2023, as well as her memoir, Life Upon the Wicked Stage. She has also written texts and lyrics that have been performed for opera, television, and film, and many of her writings have been published in translation. Grace is the tireless, gracious host of The Poet and the Poem, a prolific playwright, and a winner of many prestigious awards, including the Penn Fiction Award, the Allen Ginsberg Poetry Award, and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting Silver Medal. And this last sentence, folks, I truly, truly mean. Grace Cavalieri is a living treasure, a living legend, and a consummate international poetry citizen. Would you please welcome back to Cultivating Voices?
Oh, I'm leaving now. I am leaving now. Thank you so much. You give so much. You give so much. Thank you. I'm going to read a couple of poems, and this is from my poems selected anew. And the section I'm going to read from sounds like something I would say. And the first poem is Other People's Arms. What is this illegal operation I've performed while watching from a distance? Age, what a surprise, leaving us in the dark, reaching, I brush your hand against mine. I meet your gaze. We look out different windows to see the same tree. All days coming to this, pears turning to wine, bucketing up and down against shafting memory. Now, women have been very important to my life. I was a Navy wife for more than 25 years. They took you to the hospital to have a baby. They sustained you. And women have been my survival mechanism forever. This is called Say What You Will. I miss them, the women of the 1950s. Plain sheath dresses, large plastic earrings, coiffed hair. How they moved in the room. The one with misshapen legs would be complimented for her stockings. The women greet each other and touch hands. I lean back against the white linen lady, my back against her heart. She places her hand over my shoulder, high on my chest, and holds me to her. It says, I know something bad. I will never tell you, your husband. There is no redress. How I miss them, the women of the 60s, sandals and long, colorful skirts flopping their brilliance for sale. A high level of amiability, motives for manners, the women of the 80s, clicking high heels at meetings, lunch, umbrellas lost in restaurants. They do not like the light, these spirits. I lean back. I can still feel her hand on my chest. They died just when everything was going so well. And she, almost a perfect stranger. This sounds like something I would say. Now, I met my husband when I was 13 and we went to the movies. It was Ivy, I think with Joan Fontaine. It cost 25 cents. But the thing is this, I was so scared to have a body or to think I had a body that I didn't swallow for the whole 3 hours. I was so afraid to make a body noise that I held the saliva in my mouth for 3 hours. This is the absolute truth. So this is part of actually, this was the beginning of knowing about sex, the fact that we had bodies. This sounds like something I would say. What I did, more than likely, when we stood up in that movie, was swallow. That day at age 13, love was given to me. Today, clouds look like they did, small bunches, white puffs behind branches. Later, he would swear he never heard me gulp, although I held saliva in my mouth for 2 hours, because the body, even just a throat, should not make noise at age 13. Today, on a day just like this, Jan and I would walk down the hill. Jan is with me in kindergarten, and everything smells like bread. We are sitting together on small chairs at the Hermitage Library. This was before we knew what Eve really did. Even then, we wondered about the stories, the room we were in. Did the light make the path to the door, or did the path make the light? There was no one to ask about bright windows, shadows, or what Eve would do, and what was already widening within us. My grandmother had the first Italian restaurants in Trenton, New Jersey in the early part of the 20th century. And this is called tomato pies, 25 cents. Tomato pies are what we called them those days before pizza came in at my grandmother's restaurant in Trenton, New Jersey. My grandfather is rolling meatballs in the back. He studied to be a priest in Sicily, but saved his sister Maggie from marrying a bad guy by coming to America. Uncle Joey is rolling dough and spooning sauce. Uncle Joey is scrubbed clean, sobered up, in a white starched shirt after cops delivered him home just hours before. The waitresses are helping themselves to handfuls of cash out of the drawer, playing the numbers with Moon Mullen and Shad, sent in from Broad Street, 1942. Tomato pies with cheese, 25 cents. With anchovies large, 50 cents. A whole dinner is 60 cents before 6 p.m. How the soldiers bust in from Fort Dix would stand outside all the way down Warren Street, waiting for this new taste treat. Young guys in uniform, lined up and laughing, learning Italian before being shipped out to fight the last great war. Yes, 1942. Time travel. My father came to this country when he was 12, and his father was a PhD in agronomy and invented the first two-cylinder gasoline tractor for the hills of the Vineyard Hills. But it was stolen by Ford, his patent, and that was the immigrant story. And this has, I might refer to that in this poem, it's called Time Travel. You know, in those days, they asked Italians to change their name to English names to be more respectable. Time travel. My father was the brightest, most promising young man at the bank, or so he was told, smart, articulate, good with numbers, kind to the customers, drawing in Italians from the neighborhood. He read their letters from the old country, planned savings so their sons could go to college. He was the best there was. That must be why the president called him in his large office, offering an unexpected prize. To be an officer of the banking company, how good my father must have felt. Was he flushed with surprise? Excited? However, the head man said, you'll have to change your last name. You understand, a bank officer is different from an ordinary teller. What was his first thought? What scenes did he see? His own father, Raphael, in Pisa at the university? The young agronomist leaning over his drawings of a gas-driven tractor designed to harvest the vineyards? What did he remember of the Piazza de Cavalieri, or of the company which took the patent away without credit or cash? Or Raphael in this new country with a final note to his children of his failures? How many moments did it take for my father to refuse the offer? Did he look at the clock on the wall, move his feet on the carpet, turning slowly to the door? 20 years later, he obtained the desk after all, nearly 100 years away from Pisa and then California, harvesting its grapes with a stolen gas-driven engine. Common machinery now, all things moving slowly, just a matter of time. And I'll end with this one. Here is a poem you can hide in. When you come to wherever failed hopes go, turn here instead, where my child's voice is heard in the night, still damp from dreams. Talk of sweet surrender against the February snow, and then turn inward where silver trims the bitter limbs. I'm not afraid to mention precious aspirations, and all we know went wrong. I'm here with you, under the same sun and same moon above darkness, right here, the source of prayer, right here in my hand. Thank you so very much. Thank you, Sandy, for letting me premiere my book.
Oh my gosh, that is the one and only Grace Cavalieri.
Thank
And you know, here's my heart to you. That's
Oh,
my
mine. I hope
that's
I
my
get to
that's my
appreciate.
shorthand. But what I want to just say briefly is, first of all, if tomato pies is not a broadside yet, please let's make it a broadside. And the second thing I want to say is that Folks, if you have never listened to Grace on the
Poet and the poem,
poet and the poem,
please send me your email.
Grace is the Phil Donahue of poetry. Like, there, before podcasts, before anything that you know, there was Grace doing poetry
She's
interviews.
old. This
No.
we're celebrating our 48th year.
There it is.
This
There it
without
is.
interruption. My husband used to say, "Who could interrupt her?" So goodbye. I have another workshop at 4:30.
There
Hi,
you go. We'll see you soon.
bellissima mia, bella, molto.
Grazie, grazie, grazie.
Thank you, all you poets. You're in my heart. Bella, ciao, arrivederci.
Now, folks, that's what I wanted to say. Grace, when she is interviewing a poet, gets to the heart of the matter. And as you heard, her poems get to the heart of their matters as well. Again, that's Grace Cavalieri. Everybody, thank you so much. Our fantastic first new book showcase for our fall season. I want to thank all four of our amazing, amazing poets. What you brought, really five of our five poets, because Cathy was reading the poems of her daughter Alexandra, Zan, Delaine, Hailey, Josephine, Lore, Cheng, and Grace Cavalieri. Folks, before I make a few closing remarks, would you be so very gracious to unmute and show your appreciation for all the poets and the poems that we've heard today?
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Very good.
Thank you.
Fantastic. It really was
Very inspiring.
absolutely. Well, folks, we have so much amazing poetry coming up. You all can be on the open mic. It's our wild card open mic next Sunday. Close out our first month of our fall season. And of course, join us looking ahead a few weeks. Our first week of October, we will have our Poets Focus, and the word is possibility. Your poems on the open mic around our themed open mic of possibility. That will be Sunday, October 6th. You won't want to miss any of our new book showcases this upcoming season. Trust me, I'm not going to go through the litany of all of them, but definitely be looking for the event pages coming out a little earlier than we've been doing them previously, so that you can definitely put them on your calendar, and just put the 13th on your calendar right now. Trust me, you'll want to be here for that reading. And again, I want to say so much how grateful I am, and just love this reading with all of our poets, with Cathy, Hailey, and Cheng, and Josephine, Lore, and Grace Cavalieri. It was the starry constellation I had thought, and then some. A lot, even more light than I had anticipated. Well, everyone, you all bring your light as audience members as well. So thank you for your generosity in the chat. Thanks for those of you who've been watching on Facebook and YouTube. And of course, we look forward to seeing you next week. As I always say at the end of every program, please take very good care of yourself this week. Take extremely good care of your beloveds. And folks, just continue to write your bright lights of poetry. Just keep casting your light wherever you go. I'm Sandy Yannone, your host for Cultivating Voices Live Poetry, with, of course, the most thanks I can give to Kim Ports Parsons and Don Krieger, and to all of you for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.